Now in this tutorial, we're going to talk about the basics of tuning, first at the handle end and then at the kite end. So on the handles, of course, we have what we call the leaders. Now these here are the leaders. You'll notice that there's a series of knots from one end all the way up to here. In this particular case, we have 7 different settings. And the basic principle of this is that much like when we tell the kite to fly in forward, we put our thumbs back, and that makes the kite angle this way. Wind hits, it escapes, and that gives it more forward lift. So what the leaders on the top of the handles allow you to do is to set what I would call the idle of the engine. So the closer you bring that knot to the top of the handles, from the pilot's perspective, the more forward you're putting into the kite by default. So for example, if I'm on a very forward setting, when I take off, it might be easier to launch. It's going to go a lot faster. I might have to dig a little bit deeper to get control of it. And when I go for my turns, because those top lines are so much shorter, the bottom lines are longer, I have to apply more reach and more torque to get a turn out of it. One of the signs that you might have too much forward in the settings is that the kite makes a flapping sound. You'll actually hear the trailing edge get slack, and that would be similar in sailing to what we call oversheeting, where on the sail on a boat, it's designed to create cup and then release enough pressure to make power. But if you let the sail go too much, if this is the mast, you let that sail go, eventually it starts to be like a flag in the wind. There's no tension in the trailing edge, and it starts to vibrate and make noise. So what you're looking for is a setting really where you have enough gas, enough go, but it's not going rattling like persistently throughout the window. So now conversely, if we let the leaders out, we go further out here, what that's doing is indeed we're reducing the amount of forward load that we have, but now we're presenting more of a flat point of pressure. So that creates more cupping. So the amount of energy, the amount of pressure in the sail increases. However, depending on how you have it tipped, it may have nowhere to go. So the further example of that would be in this case, if I went all the way out to my last knot, I would feel a lot of kite out there, but no matter how much thumb I put into it, I might not be able to launch it. However, again, as I described, when you have very short adjustments on the top leaders, lots of go, bigger dig for the drive, and potentially flutter, what you're kind of working towards is a point where, playing with the knots, you find a balance where you're able to get the kite to go, but when you make inputs, they're all kind of available to you. You can go forward, you can turn, you start to feel a balance as opposed to it being all gas and then having to make big turns, or having to really jerk it to get it to go forward and then having absurdly sensitive turns. So again, the oversimplification of the leaders is closer to the pilot, more gas, less sensitivity of control, possible oversheeting or loss of pressure, but you get lots of lift. And then if you're too far out, you may not be able to get the kite moving forward enough, and the turns then of course become a lot more sensitive. So working towards that balance, first I will say that a lot of it depends on the pilot's skill level. So myself, after flying for many years, I'm very accustomed to cupping and changing the shape of the kite, which actually changes its performance. So if I can cup it and get it really locked into a good curve, the kite has a lot of good drive in it, while in the hands of another pilot that doesn't necessarily use the same style or have the same experience level, they might not find that it wants to go forward as well as it does for me. So for any new pilot, or if tuning is just simply something you're not absolutely familiar with yet, what I strongly recommend is that you start out on a longer knot. Ideally, when you try to launch, it's not going to be able to launch. You'll tug it and it'll just sort of sit there, maybe hop up and then land back on its feet. And then shorten those knots, one knot at a time, genuinely trying. So you tried it, didn't launch, move it in one knot. And again, try an excellent launch attempt at least 3 times. If it doesn't feel like the kite takes off and gives you that sense of, launch, then go ahead and shorten it one knot again. Give it 3 earnest attempts. Repeat that process all the way through until you find a knot where the kite kind of feels like it activates or awakens, and all of a sudden it's going to come off the ground and you're going to feel a pretty good balance. That usually is going to be your ideal setting. And what you'll find if you pursue the skill craft of flying a quadline kite, over time you're going to find wherever that happy knot was that you found, you worked your way back and you found a sweet spot, as you get better and better, that happy knot is actually going to exist a little bit longer and then a little bit longer. Also, it depends a lot on your style and your particular taste and what you're looking to do with the kites, but that's the basic principle of the top leaders. Now on our handles, you're also going to find a series of bottom knots. Now the bottom knots we don't use really for tuning except in unusual circumstances. What I use them for, and what you'll find here, is I use them to actually make a little bit of an offset. So if I take off, and with my sensitivity, I can tell that something is slightly out of balance, as to say that it kind of always wants to turn left, then I can go ahead and shorten the right one by a tiny bit. So in this particular case, I've put a lot of flight time on these lines, and as all lines do, they've stretched, and my right line has stretched a little bit more than my left line, and so I've just shortened that a tiny bit to give me a balance. That's what the bottom knots are for. And then what we'll do now is I'll take you down to the Kite and give you an example of how the bridle tuning works on board both the Djuice and the Djinn. All right, so now down here at the Kite end, the bridle on the Djuice and Djinn are particularly unique. There's no other bridle like it in the world. It's very flexible and it's adjustable. So what you'll find is right down here at the bottom leg, there's a series of knots that allow you to adjust. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the kite upright so that you can get a better look at it in context. So what we have here is the upper deck and the lower deck. And what this does is it's basically increasing or decreasing the distance between the top and bottom lines. And very simply, and I'll give you a closer look at this adjustment here in a moment, but quite simply, the way it works is that the longest setting, so for example, if I take this, and I go ahead and move that lark's head out to the very end knot, the longest knot, what that does is it encourages the kite's ability to do this a little bit more, and it opens the valves so that, what are the common traits here? Common trait is that one, it'll probably be generally easier to launch and get going forward. That forward launch, just the mechanics of that are a lot easier. When you go to make an input, a turn, the turn response or sensitivity will actually be reduced a little bit, and you'll notice that the kite will stay a little bit more flat and open, and you may see the center panel tend to go flat and lose pressure sometimes. So there's a balance in here. Now conversely, if I go to the extreme and I tighten this up all the way, it's almost the opposite in a lot of ways. Now, what ends up happening with that tightest setting is that the kite is going under the most compression. So you'll actually see it takes up more of a rounded and filled up shape in general. If you've gone to a maximum short position like this, you'll also find that your forward will require a little bit more conscious technique, both to initiate and to maintain, and that when you go in to make a turn, that turn is actually much more sensitive. The same amount of input, the same amount of range will actually give you a bigger response from the kite. So in general, what we find here is we call this the hold my beer setting. I don't generally use this setting on anything except extremely vented kites and sometimes our Djinn UL. When we loosen it up one knot, we call that our sport setting. So most of the Djinn flyers you'll see, again, because these are generally more practiced and educated flyers, this is, I think, where most of us are at, unless we're on a hardcore or kind of an extreme high or low wind kite. It's a pretty good balance. You do have to know a little bit about how to initiate, get the kite moving. However, you get a lot more response from your flick flacks, your axles, your turns. You can make smaller inputs that are much more measured and cleaner and still get a pretty big response. Now, the way most of these kites are coming out of the bag, and I encourage you to check, is on what we call the team setting. That's the second from the end. And for anybody who's not, they're just kind of entering the world of quad kiting, I find that's a pretty good balance, gives you a nice ratio of forward tip, gives you just a bit of compression in the sail to encourage the engine or the airfoil to take shape. And just all around, it'll serve most pilots really well, unless you are actually digging into the skillcraft and the tuning and what all that means to you in your personal flying. So with that, let me just give you one more closer look at the knot arrangement on the bridle. All right, so I brought this up a lot closer to the frame so you can really see what's going on here. As you get to work with these adjustment knots here, I just want you to see the visual of it. What we have is that there are 4 knots, one of which is in my fingers, and there are 3 gaps. 1, 2, 3. This is the end of the line, as you can see. So the last gap is what we call easy. This setting here is what we call team. This is called sport. And then you can actually go inside that very first knot from the bridle, and then again, that's hold my beer. So once more sensitivity, more compression in the sail, but also not as much easy forward inertia. Sport, a little bit more forward, excellent sensitivity, great for tricks and high precision. Team, good all-around setting for folks who are just getting into this and exploring the dynamics. And easy, a setting that frankly I don't use or typically see anybody use, but it is there if for some reason it suits your style or you're doing something that is unique to that setting. So again, that's the basic introduction to the adjustments on the Sync Bridle. The bridle on the Djuice is a little bit different than the Djinn. Same principle, same format, but the measurements are different to achieve an overall different experience for the flyer, beginner versus more experienced. And then also on our UL Djinn, that bridle also is slightly modified to be more suited to light wind, but also again follows the same format with this kind of setting and the general design shape. So with that general introduction to tuning at the handles and the bridle, I encourage you to explore both thoroughly of your own accord, because kiting is very much a thing that's subject to taste. All of our own specific body forms are different. I've been flying kites for 35 years, so my form is very natural. If you've been breaking bricks your whole life, then the posture might be a little bit different. And look at the angle of my hands, right? I didn't do that with my wrists. It's literally how I'm standing, what my form is. So tuning has a lot to do also with simply adjusting the kite so it fits you, just like getting into a car seat and shifting it to the right depth, getting to the right height, so that the gas pedals and the steering wheel are all perfectly within reach. So again, explore tuning and have a lot of fun. I'll see you in the next tutorial.